Exodus part 2, and we're going to pick up the story from where we left off yesterday. So just to summarize, we look at the biblical account of Mount Sinai. In Exodus 2:15, Moses flees from Egypt to Midian. Okay? And in Exodus chapter 3 verse 1, Moses pastures Jethro's flocks at the foot of Mount Sinai. And then God instructs Moses to go to Egypt to lead his people out of Egypt and return to Mount Sinai to worship. And we established yesterday that Mount Sinai was actually in Midian. And Midian was in Saudi Arabia. And Moses leads people out of Egypt by the way of the wilderness to the Red Sea. And Moses leads the Hebrews through the Red Sea, and Pharaoh's army is destroyed. And yesterday we showed you the journey. They started off here at Succoth. They traveled across the wilderness of Sinai, or what's called the wilderness of Sinai. And then they came to a place called Nuweiba Beach. And we showed that Nuweiba Beach was the only place that could accommodate up to 2 million people along the Sinai Peninsula. And then they crossed the Red Sea here. And then if you remember that Moses and everyone sang the Song of Moses. And then we took it to Revelation chapter 15, where again there's a group of people that sing the Song of Moses. And we identified these people. These are the people that keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus, and they do not receive the mark of the beast. And here we'll identify to you today that there is Mount Sinai at a place called Jebel El Lawz. And we pointed out that there were chariot parts on the floor. And we found horses' hooves. And on the Egyptian side, there was a pillar. Now it's interesting about this pillar because on the Saudi Arabian side, there used to be a pillar, which was just right here. And when this pillar was identified to the Saudi Arabians, they removed the pillar. And they put a little slab here saying Red Sea Coastal Survey. So they removed the pillar, they removed the evidence. But there was exactly a matching column on the Saudi Arabian side, which had inscriptions basically intimating that this was a memorial column in recognition of the Red Sea crossing. But the proof is gone. And here we see the fake Mount Sinai, where people claim it's there. And we're going to prove to you that the real Mount Sinai is there. And incidentally here, we have a monastery. This monastery is run by the Catholic Church. And they claim to be infallible. But yet we've already proven, and will prove, that Mount Sinai cannot be in the Sinai Peninsula because they've already found evidence of chariot parts and human remains on the Red Sea on this side on the Gulf of Aqaba. Okay, history for the search of Sinai. Now, there have been many people who have attempted to search for Mount Sinai, and it's not too clear, but you can see here we've got the red circles where people have claimed that these are the sites for Mount Sinai. But as you can see, most of them are on the wrong side of the Red Sea. So immediately we can discount all these ones here, which just leaves a couple here. But on this point here and this point here, there's been absolutely no evidence, and the description of these sites do not match the description you find or would expect in the Bible. Now, after they sing this Song of Moses, they travel along, and then, if you remember, when they were being chased by the Egyptian army, can you remember what they did? They started complaining, didn't they? They started saying, "You've brought us out here to die." So now they start complaining again. They're saying, "We're hungry and we want some food." So God provides them some food, and it's called manna. And he said to the children of Israel, he says, "I will give you manna every single day except the 7th day. And on the 6th day you get double portion, but on the 7th day you rest." So for 6 days you pick up your bread. On the seventh you rest. Now, the Bible tells us that if you collect too much of this manna, it will go rotten the next day. However, the double portion you take on the sixth day wouldn't go rotten on the seventh. So there was something special about this seventh day. Another thing happened as well during this time, that the Israelites started complaining again. They said, we don't like this manna, we want something else. And they started craving for the flesh pots of Egypt. And as a result, many got a plague and they died. Then they complained again. They said, you've brought us out into this wilderness, but we don't have any water. So Moses talks to God, and God says, get this rock and strike it. And out came water. And they had as much water as they needed. Now, when they went over into Saudi Arabia, they found the site. They tried to go on the site, the road that they think was what they traveled. And they came across this large rock here. And they believe that this is the very rock that Moses struck. It's a huge rock, okay? And this is the rock they believed water came out from. And we've got Aaron here. This is Aaron. He's been to this place. And interestingly, they looked at the rocks here, and it's showing water erosion, but there's no water around. So when you examine this rock, there's water erosion here, coming from here all the way down. And it's a huge place. You can see here, it might not be too easy to clearly to see, but there is water erosion at that rock. Then as they traveled, they had some enemies. Some enemies started attacking them, and so they had to prepare for battle. Now, what they found is when Moses had his rod up, they would win the fight, and when he got tired and his arm came down, they start losing the fight. So then two of the elders had to carry him and hold up his arms. So that's interesting. It's a lesson for us that we should help our elder ones. We should support them. And Joshua and his men fought against Amalek. And Moses said unto Joshua, choose out men and go out fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses had said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And here they held up his arms so that he could keep the rod up, so that they could win this fight. When Moses let down his hand, Amalek prevailed, but Moses' hands were heavy, and they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on one side and the other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. After they won this fight, something else happened. God said to Moses, tell the children of Israel to be clean, to go wash, because I'm going to present myself to you. So they bathed and they got ready. And the Lord said unto Moses, go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes. And be ready the third day, for the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. And the Lord said to Moses, and thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about, saying, take heed to yourselves that you go not up to the mount, or touch the border of it. Whosoever touches the mount shall be surely put to death. And here they actually found some pillars, the very pillars that were set up as borders along this mountain. And here God showed himself, and they were pretty scared. And Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. And there on the mount Moses went up. We're told Moses went up for 40 days and 40 nights. And there God showed him many things. He showed him a pattern. he showed him a pattern for a tabernacle that should be built. And there also God gave him the 10 Commandments. And God gave unto Moses, when he had made an end of communion with him on Mount Sinai, 2 tables of testimony, tables of stone, written with the finger of God. And next week we're going to go looking for these 10 tables, the 10 Commandments on the tables of stone. That will be next week. So Moses got the 2 tables of stone. But here we see someone. We see the devil. So while Moses was receiving this testimony, this covenant, the devil was at work. And while Moses was up there in Mount Sinai, the children of Israel were complaining, where is this Moses? And they said to Aaron, make us a god instead of this one that Moses was presenting. And so they made a golden calf and they started to worship this calf. And the Bible tells us clearly that this was idolatrous worship, contrary to the 10 Commandments. And they danced around this idol. And when the people saw that Moses had delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron, and said unto him, Up, make us gods, which shall go before us. For as this Moses, the man that has brought us out of the land of Egypt, we know not what is become of him. And so immediately, when they see Moses there, they fall into idolatrous worship. And when we start looking into future lessons, going into the book of Revelation, we will see that there's an issue over worship. And Moses came down and he discovered what took place, and he smashed the 2 tables of stone. The tables were written on both their sides, on the one side and on the other were they written. And the tables were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God, graven upon the tables. And Moses saw the people dancing around the golden calf. We're told that these tables of stone, the 10 Commandments, were written by God's own finger. And he got hold of that calf and he smashed that idol, and he made those people that committed this idolatry to drink the gold of this idol. And there he admonished the people and told them they need to change their ways and repent. And so Moses went back up into Mount Sinai, and there he had to receive another set of the 10 Commandments. Now, the earthly sanctuary was built by Moses according to the pattern shown him in the mount. It was a figure of the time then present in which were offered both gifts and sacrifices. Its only 2 places were patterns of things in the heaven. Christ, our great high priest, is a minister of the sanctuary and the tabernacle which the Lord pitched, and not man, which we find in the book of Hebrews. So Moses is given a pattern, okay, and there he instructs the Israelites to build a tabernacle according to the pattern which we find in heaven. And we find that the first 4 commandments is relation between man and God, and then the next 6 commandments is relationship between man and man. But today we find that people want to smash the law of God, and also we find there's a strong movement that people want to change the law of God. But you cannot change something that God has written with his own finger. Amen. And when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, people were afraid of him. You know why? Because his face started glowing. And it came to pass when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tables of testimony in his hand, when he came down from the mount, that Moses knew not that the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come near him. And there he instructed everyone to bring their jewelry, their treasures, to build this tabernacle. And here they constructed an ark. This is what's called the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant was where the 10 Commandments, the 2 tables of testimony, were to be placed into this ark. And I filled them with the Spirit of God in wisdom and in understanding and in knowledge and all manner of workmanship, to devise cunning works, to work in gold and in silver and in brass and in cutting of stones, to set them and the holy garments for Aaron and the priests. And God instructed the Israelites to institute the sanctuary services, which gave new insights about the Messiah and his mission. You see, God had to instruct mankind a way out of the situation they're in. And so he demonstrated them. It's like a drama stage where he set up this tabernacle and the services to demonstrate what God was going to do to rescue mankind from the sin situation. And so they built this tabernacle. And here we can see what it looks like. And they had two types of services. They had a daily service, and then they had a yearly service. And the yearly service, okay, it was 1 day a year, and it was called the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. And also during the year they would also have festivals and feast days, but the main one always culminated onto the Day of Atonement. The other thing about this tabernacle, it was designed so that as you came into the tabernacle, your back was against the sun, because the prevailing god of the time was sun worship, and God was demonstrating to them that the sun is not God. So he caused them to turn his back to the sun as they came to worship the true God. And we find that the whole system was to represent the whole plan of salvation. The courtyard was to represent God removing sin from the lives of people. Then the holy place, which was the next compartment, was to demonstrate that we are to be a holy people, to take sin and basically to help us to live a godly life. And then you had the most holy place, is where the Ark of the Covenant was held, which represented the complete removal of sin. The sanctuary faced the west, so that when the priests ministered, their backs always faced the east. Within the second apartment was the golden Ark of the Covenant, which contained the 10 Commandment law. This apartment was called the most holy place. God himself had inscribed the 10 Commandments on the 2 tables of stone. Now it's interesting, there was so much interest and so many people looking for the Ark of the Covenant, yet they're not interested in what the Ark of the Covenant is about. The Ark of the Covenant is simple. It's about storing the 10 Commandments. So people are looking all over the world for the Ark of the Covenant without realizing that the very thing it holds, the 10 Commandments, is the very thing that they're not interested in following. I don't know if anyone ever saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. And in the film, Harrison Ford actually gets to see the Ark of the Covenant. It's impossible. Anyone that saw the Ark of the Covenant would be struck dead. Anyone that touched it would be struck dead. And the story is true. Hitler was he sent out many spies and scouts because he wanted to win the war. So he thought if he could have the Ark of the Covenant, because in his mind he thought it was some super weapon, that if he could get hold of the Ark of the Covenant, then he would be the world leader. But the man had no idea that it contained the 10 Commandments, the very thing that he was breaking. Now, God's people followed the sacrificial system since the earliest time. As soon as sin came into this planet, there was a sacrificial system. But unfortunately, as soon as this system came into place, already there was 2 forms of worship. Here we see Cain and Abel, and Cain had his own form of worship, whereas Abel was following the true worship. And this stems in the last days. When we look at the book of Revelation, chapter 13, 14, 15 and 17, we will see again there's going to be 2 forms of worship. You're either going to worship the beast or you're going to worship God. And the whole point that Jesus had to come and die was because sin came onto this earth. And the Bible tells us that sin is the transgression of God's law. Therefore, God's law cannot be changed. If God's law can be changed, then Jesus didn't have to die. It's as simple as that. But he had to die because you cannot change the law of God. And Jesus cried with a loud voice, "It is finished," and gave up the ghost, and the veil of the temple was rent in twain from top to bottom. No one was allowed to go into the most holy place except the high priest. But the time came that when Jesus died on the cross, the curtain that separated the holy and the most holy place was ripped in two, which symbolized the finishing of this system. And you find this in the book of Daniel. And so on a daily basis, the priest would come in and he would offer incense and he would offer the blood of sacrifices on a daily basis. The ministration of the sanctuary consisted of two divisions, a daily and a yearly service. The daily service was performed at the altar of burnt offering in the court of the tabernacle and in the holy place. An offering of sweet incense was placed on the golden altar, and the special offerings for individual sins. So people will come and they'll lay their hands on the lamb and they will slay the lamb themselves, and that blood was offered as a sacrifice to atone for their sin. And we find here the table of showbread and the 7 candlestick lamp. And then once a year the high priest would go into the most holy place, and there he would place blood, anoint the most holy, the Ark of the Covenant there. Now Josephus says this. Josephus was a famous Jewish historian. Now Moses, taking his station at the mountain called Sinai, he drove his flocks hither to feed them. Now this is the highest of all the mountains thereabout. As they travelled this route, they found an area which was very high, and on the top of this area they found that the peaks were blackened, very unusual blackened. And when the Saudis found out about this, in fact when the Saudis they found these people that went in there, and they captured them as Israeli spies, and when they found out that these people suggesting that this was Mount Sinai, they basically cornered the whole place off, fenced it up, and are forbidding people to go there. And they found this place here. They found within the fence, you can see the fence, they found a giant altar place. And here you can see in the background, the mountain is unusually black. And remember we said that when God came down, it was altogether a smoke. There's very good evidence to suggest that this is the real Mount Sinai. And then as you look over, you find a plateau, and you find this is where the children of Israel were held. Now, interestingly, remember they built this golden calf? They found hieroglyphics on the rocks. And these are Egyptian-style hieroglyphics. What are Egyptian-style hieroglyphics doing in Saudi Arabia? And this suggests that this is the very place of Mount Sinai. And here's Horeb again. So arguments that favor Jebel laws. There's also a cave. Now we're told that Elijah, went to the cave of Mount Sinai. Went to Horeb. And we find that there is a cave. And we also have reference that there was an almond tree. And indeed there is an almond tree on the very mountain. And there you can see the cave. And here they found evidence of a dwelling place all around. Stone circles. And this is what they believed it looked like. Here you got Mount Sinai. Here's Jebel Lawz. And this is where basically they encamped. There was a plateau there as well. They even found a graveyard. But unfortunately, because of restrictions, they cannot dig up this graveyard. And the Saudi Arabians do not want any excavations to take place here. The last thing they want is the real Mount Sinai to be in Saudi Arabia, and then have all these Christians coming there to take a look. But they found a graveyard. And the testimony we find in the book of Exodus, there were quite a number of people that died of plagues. Then the story continues. God says, I will give you a land of milk and honey. So they're on the borders of Canaan. And then they send out 12 spies. These spies come back and they find giant grapes, giant fruits. But 10 of the spies are saying, we cannot enter the land. There's giants in the land. But 2 of the spies says, we can take it. And as a result, there was a civil war, there was a split, and basically they weren't very happy with Moses and they attacked Moses. And as a result, the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. And the Lord said unto Moses, Make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that every one that is bitten, when he looks upon it, shall live. And Moses made a serpent of brass, and put it upon a pole, and it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. So even when punishment came amongst them, God was merciful and gave them a way out. All they had to do was look up and live. And this very pole, this very serpent, represented what Christ was going to do for mankind on the cross. And Jesus says this to Nicodemus, As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Now the story continues. Because of this rebellion, the people of Israel are told that they are to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And during these 40 years, they learnt many lessons. They learned orderliness, cleanliness, and they learned and understood true worship. But Israel had many enemies. And here there was a king called Balak. And this king wanted to destroy the nation of Israel. And so he hired a soothsayer, or hired a prophet, someone called Balaam. And the story goes that this Balaam was told by God not to go. But he insisted on going. And eventually God said, Go, but I will speak through your mouth. And so the king said to Balaam, he says, curse these people. But instead of cursing these people, he announced a blessing. 3 blessings. Now, this prophet Balaam, he had an idea. He knew that God spoke through him with these blessings. But he knew that the only way we can make these people weak is to stop them from worshipping the true God. And how do we do that? Through idolatry. So he suggested to the king, Balak, send in women, send in prostitutes, make them to commit adultery and fornication and pornography. And so he sends them in, and as a result, the men of Israel start apostatizing, and which brought weakness and brought destruction upon them. And as a result, they had to clean the camp again. And because this is what Balaam did, they took revenge and they went and destroyed him. And here we see Prophet Balaam got killed. So, summarizing. Exodus 17. Israel camps in Rephidim. God provides water from the rock at Horeb. Exodus 19. Moses leads Israel to the wilderness of Sinai, and Moses ascends the mountain of God. Exodus 19 again, God visits Sinai with earthquakes, fire and smoke. And then in Exodus 20, God gives the 10 commandments and many other laws. Exodus 25, the tabernacle is built. And Exodus 32, rebellion of the golden calf. And Exodus Numbers 10, the tribes leave Sinai. Now, after they're traveling, the Israelites, they complain again. They say, we need water. But did God provide water the first time? But in his anger, Moses strikes the rock. Can anyone remember how many times? Twice. He was never meant to strike the rock twice. In fact, he already struck the rock the first time once. And he was told to speak and the water would come out. But in anger, he hits the rock twice. And as a result, God is displeased with him. Why? Why is this? And Moses and Aaron gathered the congregation together before the rock and said unto them, Hear now, ye rebels, must we fetch you water out of this rock? And Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice. And the water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their beast also. But the issue was this. Christ was only to be smitten once. And that rock was representative of Christ, that was to be smitten once. But because Moses smote it twice, he ruined the type. And as a result, God was displeased, and even so, he was not allowed to enter in to Canaan. And so the time came when Mary and Joseph went to Bethlehem, and she gave birth to Christ. And here we see the Star of Bethlehem. In the blessing that Balaam gave to King Balak about the Israelites, he said that there will be a star that will rise. And this is the very star in fulfillment of the prophecy of this prophet Balaam. And here Jesus wandered, and then he came to time when he was to die in Gethsemane. And here he was delivered to Herod, and then he was delivered to Pontius Pilate, and he said, "Behold, this is your king." And they said, "We have no king but Caesar." And there he died on the cross in fulfillment of that very saying that he said, "As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must I be lifted up, so that many can live." And here we see an actual foot bone discovered with a crucifixion nail. This is what it would have looked like. And there he died on the cross. And when that happened, the curtain in between split, signifying that there is no more earthly sanctuary. There is no more services to be done in the earthly sanctuary. No more slaying of the lamb. No more yearly festivals. No more Day of Atonement. It was finished. And after 3 days, Jesus resurrected. And sometime years later, around just before AD 70, there were forebodings in the sky. People could see strange things in the sky. And Josephus records this in the book of Josephus. And he says there was like bad omens in the sky. Because at this time, Jerusalem was surrounded by the armies of Rome. And there was a man inside Jerusalem saying, "Woe, woe, woe, you're going to be destroyed." Going every day, every night. And eventually the Romans, they withdrew. And then shortly after, the Romans came back again and besieged Jerusalem. And eventually this time Jerusalem was taken and it was destroyed. And this is all outlined in the book of Daniel chapter 9. But what was the cause root of this? Because the people of God committed idolatry, false worship. And the same things happening today and is going to happen, and this is all outlined in the book of Revelation chapter 13. And God warns us today about this false worship. And he tells us that he's going to come back again to rescue his people. Jesus says he will come back again. We've shown you today the story of Moses, what it represents. We've shown you the real Mount Sinai and what that represents. And from Mount Sinai came forth the 10 Commandments. And I'm going to put it to you tonight that the issue revolving around Revelation 13, 14, 15 and 17, which I suggested yesterday, hopefully you've gone back and you've read those chapters, is revolving around the 10 Commandments. And why is that? Because yesterday, if you remember, again, these people that sing the song of Moses, the song of victory, they overcome the beast, the mark of the beast, they keep the commandments of God, and they have the faith of Jesus.